So before I start, I would like to ask a question. What do you think is diversity? Okay, so when we think of diversity, we often think of it in terms of race, religion, ethnicity, or culture. But what about communication? How often do we think about the various forms of diversity in communication? We can think of diversity as a mosaic. Each piece is different and unique, but these pieces come together to form a bigger picture. Embracing diversity means understanding that each difference has a value to it. In the core of each piece lies belief in oneself. This way, we can acknowledge our uniqueness and leverage it as our strength. We can think of communication diversity as a mosaic as well, because the way each one of us communicates is different, as it is influenced by our surroundings, our environment, and even our genetics. I've had my fair share of communication challenges due to my stutter, which you probably heard by now. Stutter always made it quite impossible for me to just speak. I would be lying if I said overcoming it was easy, because it had taken quite a toll on me. This stutter shaped my early years as I grew up quite reserved, and tasks such as talking to my teachers or my classmates became some of my greatest achievements. I used my stutter as an excuse to be quiet and then hide in plain sight. But as I was frustrated at myself because I couldn't speak the way society expected me to. That was articulating my thoughts without any problems whatsoever. However, as I grew up, I realized something that was quite shocking to me at the time. My sister, who I used to be quite envious of because she didn't have a stutter, still struggled to communicate. It was this realization that gave me the understanding that communication diversity goes far beyond speech impediments. It is influenced by countless factors such as culture, religion, and even anxiety. But unlike physical differences, these influences often remain hidden, and sometimes they even affect us mentally. How many of us here have felt misunderstood or struggled to express ourselves in different environments? Now, I'm going to ask you to imagine something. Imagine you're in a room filled with a bunch of people who speak a language that you do not understand, that you're not familiar with. How confident are you that you will be able to convey a message to the other person by just using your words? That sounds about right. When we communicate, we rely on three things: tone, words, and our body language. Have we heard of Albert Mehrabian's 7-38-55 rule? This rule implies that in communication, the interpretation accounts for only 7%, our words account for only 7% of the interpretation, while our tone and our nonverbal forms of communication account for the other 38% and 55% respectively. Consider the world of social media. Platforms like X, Instagram, and TikTok have transformed the way we communicate, allowing for a blend of visual and auditory messages. A tweet on X can be easily misinterpreted because it lacks tone and body language, while a reel on Instagram can be understood easier, as the video feature allows for these three critical components to be relayed when sending a message. Hence, these platforms showcase the beauty of diversity in communication. This diversity also acknowledges that everyone has their own unique way of expressing themselves. Cultural backgrounds play a huge role here. For example, in Western cultures, such as American and Canadian cultures, maintaining eye contact is seen as a sign of engagement and confidence. However, in Japanese and Korean cultures, it can be perceived as a little disrespectful. Similarly, the use of slangs, dialects, and even accents can add layers of meanings to our conversations. Just like accents and dialects can be misunderstood, our unique ways of communicating may sometimes be also misunderstood. But that doesn't diminish our ability to connect. In fact, by embracing our differences, we start to realize that communication is less about the actual words you say, but more about your actions and the context in which you express yourselves. This perspective allows us to turn our differences into strengths. I remember when I was on stage 9 years ago, trying to say some lines for my class assembly. I paused, I was shocked, and I was frustrated. I just couldn't get the words out. My stutter had betrayed me. It was only after that I learned to embrace my stutter. Embracing my voice, my pauses, and my stutter, it didn't just change the way I spoke, but the way I listened. I became more patient, more willing to hear others. I became more empathetic. This demonstrates that by embracing our differences, it doesn't just make us comfortable in our own skin, but it also opens us to embracing others as they are. As I gathered up the courage to say my lines that day, I fumbled at the first few words. I felt a familiar wave of embarrassment flow through me, but something was different that time. I still continued to speak. After the assembly, one of my classmates came forward, and I remember embracing myself for the usual pitiful comments coupled with the awkward smile and the awkward giggle. At that age, I always assumed people thought I wasn't intelligent enough or I was simply too lazy to contribute. But instead, she praised my courage, and I remember having a delightful conversation with her. That moment shattered the assumptions I had made about myself, and it taught me that open-mindedness is not just about how we see others, but also about how we see ourselves. While keeping an open mind and being empathetic, we come to realize that every person has a unique set of experiences, cultural backgrounds, and communication styles. By celebrating these differences, we transform the potential barriers, the noise, into opportunities for growth and learning. What if we start to embrace not just the words we say, but the way each of us uniquely communicate? How would that affect the way we connect with one another? There are many of us who don't solely rely on words to communicate, whether it be due to language barriers, stutter, or even anxiety. There's still a whole world of communication available. You don't have to speak perfectly to get your point across. In fact, your tone and body language can just be enough, if not even more powerful, in conveying your true message. Thank you.